When loss compounds, how grief can build a community healer. There was a moment in my life where the losses didn't come one at a time. They came all at once. And I remember thinking, how much can one person hold before they break? Grief is something we all expect eventually, but no one prepares you for what happens when grief doesn't come as a single wave, but as an ocean. When I lost my mother, everything changed. She wasn't just my mother, she was my connection, my life giver, my grounding, my sense of home. And when she was gone, I didn't just lose her. I lost a part of myself. Grief doesn't knock politely on my door. It moved in. It sat me in silence. It followed me into every room of my life. It showed up in moments that were supposed to feel normal again, but never did. And then something else happened. The grief didn't stay in one place. It began to compound. It wasn't just the loss of my mom. It became the loss of certainty, the loss of identity, the loss of beliefs I had carried my entire life. I was raised to understand the world in a certain way, to believe, to trust, to follow. But grief has a way of asking questions that belief systems don't always answer. And in that space between what I had been taught and what I was feeling, I found myself asking, what is the real truth? And then something unexpectedly happened. I began to feel some connections, not in a way I had been taught, not through structure or rules or rituals, but something quieter, something deeper, in those moments of silence, in my dreams, in feelings I couldn't explain, but couldn't deny. I felt like my loved ones weren't that far away as I believed they were. And that changed everything, because what I began to understand is that grief is not about loss, it's about proximity. We grieve deeply because we love deeply, because we were connected, because someone mattered. But here's the part that no one talks about. The connection doesn't just disappear. What if the intensity of our grief is actually a reflection of a connection that still exists, just in a different form? What if people we've lost are not completely gone, but still walking with us in ways we don't always recognize? This idea didn't take place in my grief right away, but it helped me to change the relationship with it. Instead of asking, how do I get over this? I began asking the question, what is this here to teach me? And that question changed the direction of my grief life. Because I looked up from my own quiet living room and I looked at my 36 years of experience as a community building social worker and crisis consultant, I realized something profound. Our organizations, workplaces, and our cities are drowning in the exact same compound of losses. Everywhere I looked, people were grieving silently, privately, alone, and in communities and teams weren't just struggling with loss, they were completely overwhelmed by it. The loss of psychological safety, the loss of trust, the loss of identity, and the systemic disconnection that leaves us fractured. We are living through an epidemic of loss with nowhere for it to go. And what is our modern leadership response to the collective friction of our heartbreak? We try to manage grief through performance compliance. We offer 3-day corporate bereavement leave policy and expect human beings to instantly snap back to peak productivity. We host mandatory 2-hour wellness webinars or generic diversity check-in training and pretend the foundation of our culture isn't cracked. We treat human suffering like a HR, human resources liability, instead of an operational reality. But when grief and trauma have no container, they don't disappear. They turn into corporate burnout, people quitting, bitter workplace silos, and deep isolation. You cannot build a healthy business or a thriving nonprofit or a resilient municipality on top of a foundation of unhealed trauma. So I made a decision. If grief needs somewhere to land, then we have to deliberately build a structural container that can hold it. I took my 3 decades of field experience directing large-scale crisis operations, navigating intense systemic trauma, and building community coalitions, and I stepped into the light. I brought this work to life, launching the Grief Warrior program and the Masters Community Building program. We don't bring people into spaces to fix them. We give leaders and organizations the exact operational tools to build a grief-informed culture through systemic blueprint. First, we have to look at the pain in the eye. We don't just send them anonymous online corporate surveys. We sit face to face with people and ask the raw questions to find exactly where the trust has broken down. And secondly, we build real sanctuary. We move from a superficial feel-good HR statements and create an environment of unshakable psychological safety, and a space where people can finally drop their armor, bring their whole selves to the table, and know that they won't be penalized for their honesty. And third, we weave a permanent safety net. We don't just host a one-time workshop and walk away. We establish lasting, everyday connections between teams and departments so that when the next inevitable economic or social storm hits, the bridge between us are already solid and no one is left to face the darkness alone. Because here is what 36 years in the trenches has taught me. We people are supported by real structured containers. Grief doesn't just break them, it builds them. It builds deep empathy. It builds authentic relationship. It builds massive collected purpose. It can turn someone who is hurting into someone who helps to heal. It creates grief warriors. And when you bring those people together, you just don't heal individuals. You rebuild an entire community from the inside out. So if you're leading a company, a community, or a team that feels fractured, stop running from the tension. Stop trying to paper over the structural cracks with performance compliance. If you're carrying personal grief, you are not broken, you're connected. If your organization is feeling loss, it's not a liability to run from. It's a design challenge to listen to. Maybe the question for your leadership is, how do we survive this crisis? Maybe the question is, who are we being called to become because of it? The truth is, we are not meant to walk through the dark alone. Let's roll up our sleeves, look at the rumble, and build an architecture of connection that builds to last. Thank you.